When the white men came to now Washington State, they found forests and brush and open meadows, and a little farther east from where we lived there were great vast prairies of wild grass, great for farming and ranching. Lots of open areas, meadows, tall grass, lush, wonderful grazing for cattle. So it was mostly settled early by cattle ranchers who let the animals run free on the range and rounded up in the fall before the snow flew. And then as progress caught up with us, the fence was developed and put in kind of like this fence here that we have with 3 wires and a wood post and lots of labor. And these were required to keep the cattle from encroaching on cultivated areas, because it was open range in those days, and it was the landowner's responsibility to keep the cattle out if he didn't want them in. It was wild country, little clearings and lots of trees, lots of huge trees like this fellow here that we're walking by now. Brush, we had lots of brush. See, brush. And the cattle loved that area because the brush they could feed on and hide in and get out of the sun and the rain. And mostly unowned and unclaimed yet by settlers or anything. Government-owned land, mostly federal yet. And the controls were minimal at best. But the fence turned out to be a great control mechanism for cattle. It allowed the farmer to raise hay, as we did, for the winters, so we could pasture our cows on the open range through the summer and round them up in the fall and feed them through the winter on the hay that we'd raised on the land that was fenced off. But it is our responsibility to keep the fences up and repaired, because if the cattle broke through and got into the hay, that was our problem, not the cattle's owner. And like you could see a break in the fence for only a few days could put a ranch such as ours out of business, because we wouldn't have the winter feed. This is late October now here, and in 2 to 3 weeks, maybe 4 if we're lucky, the snow will begin, and we get 4 feet and more every year. And those 4 feet of snow is interlaced with layers of ice from ice storms that come through during the winter. And those half-inch or more layers of ice, as the snow settles, takes the wires to the ground or breaks them, pulling staples, sometimes breaking off posts. Very hard on fencing. So it became very essential early that we have a good way to repair fence without too much effort. When the West was young and unsettled, among the first permanent settlers were cattlemen. They brought their cattle in and they found abundant grazing. There was lots of water and open meadows and trees and forests and yes, even brush. Lots of brush in this country that the cattle thrived on. So it was straight for the cattlemen. But they had their homes, and to protect their gardens and the home area from the cattle that were roaming free on all of that open territory called open range, they brought in the barbed wire fence. Typically it was a 3-wire fence with posts like this one. This one has been turned because they can stick it in the ground, it starts to rot off, and then they turn it over and they use it twice as long. Wood posts and barbed wire were used in those early days to keep control on the cattle so that they could raise our hay. Our operation was a small operation at High Cascades in the Columbia Gorge area. We had meadows and cleared fields, about 40 acres. We raised hay for the winter on those 40 acres and let our cattle range on the open range with everybody else's cattle. And we had roundups in the fall, bring those animals in and sell off the ones we needed to sell. And But in the spring, those fences had to be up and ready to keep the cattle out and maintained throughout the summer. But the fence was the bulk of the work. We had to maintain that. Every time it was broken or cut, it would be a repair job. And we never knew when in the summertime it would happen, because the people would come through and cut them. In the spring, it was a massive job because it would all be on the ground. We'd have 2-3 feet of snow. We'd get a half inch or so of ice and more snow, and as it settled, they would pull the wires off the posts or break them. Sometimes break off the posts themselves. But we could count on every spring, after accumulation of at least 4 feet of settled snow, that our fences would be down. We'd have to repair them in the spring. So the hammer technique that was passed down to me by my father and to him by his father, and probably his father before him, was a boon, because we didn't have to carry around heavy fence stretching equipment and tractors and the like to maintain those fences. We could stretch anywhere, anywhere. The Old West. The line fencing was maintained by cattlemen, hands that worked for large farmers and ranchers, and part of their major function was to repair these miles of fences. Other areas farther east are covered with miles, straight miles of wire fence going as far as the eye can see over the hill, and those were all maintained by men on horseback with a hammer and a bit of wire and a few staples in their pack. Let's look at how it takes to patch a broken wire and fix a fence that needs repair. This is a kind of a typical looking break. The modern wires are made from recycled steel, so they're more springy and brittle than the older wires. And I find in this day, if you have one of those springy wires, it's easier just to form a loop and ease into the break and use a soft iron wire to complete the repair. I've left my pliers at home, my wire cutters, so we'll show a method we used in the field. We kink the wire like this and bend it a few times, like that. Kinking it in the same place each time, and it breaks soon because of crystallization of the wires. Doesn't weaken the wire, the rest of the wire, just at the break. Iron wire that's about 10 gauge that I have, and we'll form another loop in the wire here to attach these two wires together, make a nice tight loop, and kind of dress it up so it looks good. And then I'm going to go get the other wire and we'll fasten those together. Now this broken wire has a loop in it at the other end of the break, and I take my soft iron wire and thread it through the loop, bring it as tight as I can, and hold it like that so it stays until I can get the hammer onto it. And oops, got my hammer. We take the hammer and form a loop like that so that the wire is caught in the claws securely, and the wire comes over the top of the hammer through the loop. So we have a winch action going, and we just bring it up as tight as we want to. It's really tight. That seems to be pretty good. And then with lots of track pressure, we bend that wire back over itself, the soft wire, so it rolls back like this until the hammer comes out, and we can release the hammer. But the wire holds itself because of the kink in the wire. And then we take the patching wire and we wrap it around in the patch here to make a good looking loop. And if we had the wire cutters, we could cut it off here, but as I said, I left them at the house, so I'm just going to do the kink system again and break it there close so it looks good. And take a second to break the wire that way, and we dress up the patch so it's appearance is okay and it's stable. As I said, these new wires are made of recycled steel and a little harder to work. But there we have a fairly decent looking patch that will last as long as the wire does in most cases. And it's done in just in a minute or two or 5, whereas it would take quite a while to go back to the barn and get the fence stretchers and do it any other way. Dad showed me this at age 12 when he gave me the task of doing the spring repair and the summer maintenance on the wires. The time spent running back and forth for wire stretchers was saved because I could use the hammer technique and repair any break anywhere, anytime with great convenience. In the springtime, the miles of wire that had to be checked and restrung would have required a lot of effort to carry around the heavier equipment. But the hammer technique saved us lots of time and effort there too, and it was very important to the process of raising cattle on that open range. Let's take a look at what it takes to pull a post. As we mentioned earlier, sometimes we want to pull a post and turn it over. This one is a fence row I'm removing. So I'll show you how to do that by pulling it straight with a vehicle, or sometimes you can do it with a horse or a simple lash rope. You take the chain or rope or whatever you got. I like to use chain because it's plenty heavy enough. This is an overkill. You wrap it around 2 times. The second wrap is under the first wrap, and then you hook it onto the chain like that. That way when you pull it up, it stays on the post, doesn't slide. Then the next step is a good stout block of wood set propped against the post like that, and the chain is laid all straight up and over the block as you see there. That allows us, when the chain is pulled, to get a straight up pull on the post rather than sideways. Now I'm going to go get in the truck and pull that post. I won't be able to talk to you until I get back, but if you look at the screen, you'll be able to see what's going on. I'll try to pull it slow enough so you can see it happen. We had a moment's hesitation there. I stalled the truck in the process, but because I was trying to go slow. That's how a post is pulled without damaging it. You can pull a rotted off post and turn it over by cleaning out the old hole and putting it back in and resetting it. And this is another real quick and simple process that can be done. We could do it with levers and stuff, but it's nice to have a truck or something like that to do it with. Well, this is what they look like when they come out. This guy's been on the ground for about 15 years, doesn't show any sign of rotting, so I'll save it. If I make another fence somewhere, I'll be able to reuse it. It was in the ground about 2 feet and came out fairly easy, as you saw, but it took quite a tug. I appreciate the opportunity to have shared a little bit of the history of this area and my life with you. And I hope that you have enjoyed the narrative and found the instructions on repairing your fence useful.